The New York Giants roster continues to take shape, but still a lot of unanswered questions that need to be resolved before week one's opening day. What's next for the Giants? What are some of the questions and what are some of the ways they can go? We'll talk about all that on today's LockedOn Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina, and it is Thursday, September 1st. Yes, we have made it into September, folks. Summer's just about over. Kind of sad to see summer go, but football season is so close. Actually, this weekend is the last weekend without any real Giants football for quite some time. So we've got one more weekend of the barren wasteland to get through, and then it is time for the football to start for real. And it is an exciting time in the land of the Giants. And on today's show, we're going to take a look at some of the moves the Giants continue to make to shape their roster. But more importantly, we're going to take a look at what's next for this Giants team. You know, what do they still need to do in order to get themselves ready for their September 11th date at Tennessee? So all that and more on today's show. Happy to have you with us. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. All right, before we do anything, let's get caught up on the latest roster moves. The Giants were awarded 4 guys off of waivers. They had to cut 4 guys due to procedural matters, and then they moved some guys to IR. So we're just going to run down the entire list real quick. The waiver wire guys that the Giants were awarded include interior offensive lineman Jack Anderson, who comes to the Giants via the Eagles, but who originally started with Buffalo. So he's a guy that both Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll are familiar with. He's a guy who could play guard or center, and probably going to just slide right in there and be the backup center to John Feliciano. The Giants also picked up Justin Lane, defensive back, via the Steelers, who's a former third-round pick by Pittsburgh in 2019. Jason Pinnock, defensive back from the Jets. He's a safety, so he rounds out that safety depth, gives the Giants a little bit more juice back there. I believe Pinnock was a 5th-round pick of the Jets in 2021, and he was a guy that the Jets didn't want to lose, but you know, the Jets had an abundance of safeties, and they exposed him to waivers and hoped to get him back, and the Giants just snapped them up. And then finally, defensive back Nick McLeod, who comes to the Giants via the Bills. All right, so overall, 3 of the guys that the Giants picked up off of waivers, Jack Anderson, Nick McLeod, prior experience and ties to Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll up in Buffalo, and Jason Pinnock with the Jets. You know, the Giants, of course, last week having a joint practice with the Jets, as well as the preseason finale. So those are the guys they picked up. Now, to make room for them, the Giants had to waive 4 players. So the guys that they cut included offensive lineman Max Garcia, defensive lineman Nick Williams, tight end Tanner Hudson, and linebacker Austin Calitro. Those were procedural moves, folks, because they had to make room for those guys that they picked up off waivers. Since then, Garcia was signed to the practice squad. Nick Williams, Tanner Hudson, and Calitro were signed back to the 53-man roster. And those guys were added to replace the 3 guys that the Giants put on IR. Shane Lemieux, Rodarius Williams, and Ellerson Smith. So those 3 guys that were placed on IR now have to miss a minimum of 4 games. So what else can I tell you about the roster moves made today? Believe it or not, no Giants were claimed off waivers. That was kind of surprising. Now, the practice squad list that the Giants assembled, this is not a complete list. This is not an official list, but some of the names on it, these are guys that were spotted at practice on Wednesday. Davis Webb, Quincy Roche, Jashawn Corbin, Zion Gilbert, Ryder Anderson, CJ Board, Jalen Moore, Will Holden, Roy Mbadaka, Garrett McGinn, Harrison Hand, Darren Evans, Trenton Thompson, Nate Metters, and Austin Allen. Now, there are also reports that Chuck Wiley, formerly with the Ravens, is on his way to join the practice squad. I mentioned before Max Garcia was signed to the practice squad, so it's possible he's going to take that 16th spot. And there was also a report that Tony Jefferson, formerly with the Ravens, signed with the Giants. I don't know, though, if it's with the 53-man roster or the practice squad. So those are some of the moves that were made today. Probably going to be more made in the coming days as this Giants roster takes shape. All right, folks, coming up next, we're going to talk about what's next for this Giants team. What are some of the questions that are unanswered, and how could they possibly answer them? That's coming up next on the LockedOn Giants podcast. Hey, Giant fans, it's almost time to start the NFL season. And if you're into sports betting or fantasy, you need a competitive edge to win. That's why I highly recommend the Elias Game Plan app. It's the ultimate sports betting and fantasy companion for NFL, NBA, and MLB. Powered by the Elias Sports Bureau, the official statisticians of U.S. Pro Sports League, including the NFL, Elias Game Plan lets you access team and player stats, head-to-head comparisons, and Elias insights from the Elias Sports Bureau's research team. And if you're into fantasy football, this app is perfect for helping you plan and manage your fantasy team all season long. Take my advice. Download the Elias Game Plan app today and take your game to the next level. Find Elias Game Plan app in the App Store or Google Play Store today. All right, welcome back to the LockedOn Giants podcast. I'm Patricia Traina, and we're going to talk about what's next for the New York Giants. They still have some unanswered questions. We'll talk about some of those questions and how I think it might play out. And of course, this remains to be seen how the Giants practice next week as they start to get ready for week 1 against the Tennessee Titans. But I have some thoughts. And of course, there's some variables that could pop up that I don't anticipate, but we'll talk about them all. So before we get started, just a quick announcement. The live show with the entertainer, which is scheduled for Friday, we're actually going to push that back to 1 o'clock. Normally we started at 11 a.m. Eastern, but I have something that I need to do around that time. So Tana and I are going to go live 1 o'clock, and we're going to talk about the state of the Giants. We're going to take your questions. We're just going to have a great old time. The newly slimmed down Tana, he announced on Twitter today that he's lost 48 pounds, and I'm going to have to get his secret because he looks fantastic. So good for Tana. Looking forward to that show. And of course, looking forward to seeing all of you on the show live on Friday. Okay, let's get into what's next for the New York Giants. I have, some question marks, if you will, that I think still need to be resolved. And obviously, the first one we've got to talk about is the statuses of the injured guys, the guys that we don't really know about. So, for example, Jihad Ward, Ben Bredesen, Aziz Ojulari, Kadarius Toney, Kayvon Thibodeau. Where are those guys in their rehab? Will they be able to practice? And if so, how much will they be able to do? Well, we're not going to find out until next Wednesday, I believe, which is the first day the Giants have to file an injury report. So I got to think in the case of, Jihad Ward and Ben Bredesen has the elbow injury, obviously not serious enough to land him on IR. So that's the good news. But how close are these other guys to being ready? And will they be ready for week 1? Now, naturally, head coach Brian Dable was asked about that. And he wasn't able to, or didn't want to, I should say, give much of an answer because, I guess he doesn't want to be tied in or tie these guys into a certain timeline. So still a little bit of a mystery as to who's going to be ready for week 1 for the Giants amongst the injured guys. And we'll find that out, or we'll get a better clue, I think, next Wednesday when the first injury report does come out. Okay, the next biggest question in my mind that is yet to be resolved. Who's going to be the starting left guard? All right. So we know Shane Lemieux is on IR. They brought in the guy off waivers, as I mentioned before. Who's going to be the starting left guard? Is it going to be Devery Hamilton, who has played that role in the summer? Is it going to be Joshua Azudu, who is limited in the summer? Is it going to be somebody else? Maybe they bring a guy up like Max Garcia, for example, from the practice squad. Maybe they do some shuffling. Well, as you can imagine, the question was put to Brian Dable, and he didn't really have much of an answer. Pretty much it's, let's see what happens. So what I think makes the most sense at this point is Devery Hamilton has been at the role. Why upset that apple cart? If he's been doing it for the last however many weeks in practice, why not just stick with him? And then, when the other guys are ready, then you maybe gradually move off of him if he's not doing a good enough job. So, I get it. Dables has to, cover his bases. He has to think about all angles, but why overthink this? It's kind of like the situation with the offensive coordinator and who's going to call the play, which is another, unresolved question. And I talked about this before. Mike Kafka's been calling the plays all summer, and Dable hasn't come right out and announced who's going to, be the play caller for the regular season. But why would you make a change right now when the guy's been doing it all summer long and has supposedly been doing a good job? So it's kind of the same situation at left guard. That's why I think that Devery Hamilton is going to probably be the left guard come opening day. Now, they'll probably work other guys at the spot to see what they have, but why upset that apple cart? It just makes no sense to me to do that. All right. Another question that is unresolved right now is who is going to be the return specialist. Now, Richie James got a look at as a return specialist. Okay. Gary Brightwell got a little bit of a look. The Giants, I think they're still auditioning guys, believe it or not, for the return specialist job. So that might not seem like a big deal to a lot of people, but it can be, because field position is everything, folks. And if they could get a guy who can give them decent field position, starting field position as a kickoff returner and on punts, that's going to be huge. So I don't want to say that the auditions are continuing, but I kind of do get the impression that they're still looking to find the right combination of guys for special teams to be the returners. I'm not so convinced that, Gary Brightwell is going to be one of them and Richie James is going to be the other. I think they're still auditioning guys to find the right combination at kickoff and punt returner. All right. Another question mark is depth at tight end. Now, I'll be honest with you. I thought maybe the Giants would add another tight end, and they still might. By the time you hear this show, they still, maybe they add another tight end. But right now, there's a lot of inexperience at tight end. Daniel Bellinger's the rookie, is going to be the starter. Chris Myrick is the fullback. And then you have Tanner Hudson, who's going to be one of the tight ends. So I still wonder, because, I've said this before on the show, originally the Giants wanted a veteran to go with the youth, to help with the transition. So originally they had, Ricky Seals-Jones, Jordan Akins. They were two veterans with enough games under their belts. And of course, the injury bug claimed them. So you just wonder if maybe they're going to look to upgrade at that spot at some point. I don't think the tight end is going to be an important role in per se, in terms of, running a lot of 12 and 13 personnel, but the tight end is going to be instrumental in the passing game. And, I just think that maybe at some point they might look to upgrade that spot, pending on it, maybe not right away, but at some point after the first week or so, maybe they'll see who's out there and see if they can upgrade it. So that's another decision that I think they need to make. Now, I probably should have started with this one when I talked about what's next for the Giants, because this is actually an important one. The Giants need to do something about their salary cap, right? I mean, I feel like I've been saying this every time, or just about every time. Okay, as of Wednesday, the end of the day, after making all the roster moves that they made. The Giants are actually in the red by 5.205 million of total cap space and effective cap space, which basically means they are over the cap right now. They have got to figure out a way to get under the cap. And, sooner or later, this was going to happen. But I've said it before, Leonard Williams is the answer. The Giants are going to have to redo that contract, lower that base number, that base salary that he has, which I think is about 19 million, get some cap relief and hope that that's enough to take them through the rest of the year. I don't know that it will be, but the cap situation is still very much a mess. And it's not Joe Schoen's fault. This is what he inherited when he took the job, but he's probably looking at least another year before that cap is fully healthy. It is going to be better next year, but not going to be totally healthy for another 2 years. Now, interestingly enough, the Giants, I think, have like the second or third biggest amount of dead money. They have 34.728 million in dead money. That is not the most in the league. The most in the league, I believe, is the Eagles, who have 59.839 million in dead money. So that's a figure that's going to have to be cleaned up. Nothing the Giants could do about that until next year. So unfortunately for Joe Schoen, it looks like he's going to have to push money down the road, something I know he didn't want to do, but he's going to have to do it. Otherwise, he's just not going to have enough to operate. There's not going to be enough to bring up guys as standard practice squad elevations. There's not going to be enough to handle injury replacements, signings, all that good stuff. So Schoen needs to give himself some breathing room. That is a big question mark that the Giants need to resolve. And really the answer is Leonard Williams. You're not touching Kenny Galladay's contract because you want that contract off your books as soon as you could possibly get it. So really that's the only other way to go. All right. Couple more coming up. We're going to take a quick break and then we'll wrap it up with a few more question marks and what's next for the Giants right after this. Hey, Giant fans, sometimes you're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks and a few becomes too many. And as the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride. But then you say to yourself, nah, you live nearby. You can make it home okay. It's not a big deal. Well, it is a big deal, folks. Everybody knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, please think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or somebody else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the LockedOn Giants podcast. I'm Patricia Traina, and we are looking at what's next for the New York Giants. What is still left on their to-do lists as they continue to tweak their roster, as they continue to make decisions ahead of opening day, which is a little more than a week away at Tennessee. Big season coming up for the Giants. There are a couple more things that they probably want to address. The first one that comes to mind is that cornerback depth. Now, the cornerback depth, the starters, not too bad. They have Aaron Robinson, Adoree Jackson. Even though Robinson had a shaky summer, he should be okay, I think, with more experience. What about Darnay Holmes? Darnay Holmes at the slot cornerback, he should be fine. But then behind them, you've got Cordell Flott, who made the roster. And Cordell Flott's, tackling this summer, really not very good, not as sharp. And I continue to remain concerned about his lack of bulk and his size and if he's going to hold up at this level. So, I'm pretty sure the Giants at some point are going to add another cornerback to that group. It's got to be a veteran. It's got to be. Now, who that veteran is, I don't know, but I can't imagine them going with another, young player or somebody who doesn't have a whole lot of experience. I think just get somebody who can kind of be an anchor along with Adoree Jackson in that cornerback room. All right, at safety, the Giants currently have 3, but there were reports that Tony Jefferson, formerly with the Ravens, is on his way to New York. That's going to be huge, ladies and gentlemen. Tony Jefferson not only knows Wink Martindale's system, but he's a veteran and a pretty good one at that. So that's a big addition, if that is indeed true. And if you judge by Tony Jefferson's Twitter account, it looks like it is true. It looks like he is Big Apple bound and headed to the Giants. So that's a big addition. All right, what else is a question mark for the Giants? This is a big one. Daniel Jones in the passing game. Now, we saw a lot of encouraging signs from Daniel Jones this summer. He looked good in the preseason games. Towards the back end of training camp, he was starting to look more comfortable in the offense. But here's the thing, folks. He wasn't throwing to his top receivers. All right. Kenny Golladay got what? 1 target. All right. Sterling Shepard didn't get any targets. Kadarius Toney, I don't think got any targets. Wan'Dale Robinson's targets were limited. So basically, Daniel Jones, in throwing to the receivers, was throwing to guys that are maybe at the bottom of the depth chart or who aren't even on the roster anymore. You know, Alex Bachman, who's not on the roster anymore, led the team and led the league for that matter with 19 receptions. So why do I mention that? Well, every receiver is different. And in this offense, it's important for the quarterback and for the receiver to be on the same page, because if they are not on the same page, guess what? You're going to have a lot of sloppy passing. And we saw that last year with the Giants when Jones wasn't on the same page with receivers who had missed most of training camp because of injuries or whatever the reason might have been. Giants need to avoid a repeat of that happening. So that is a big concern as we get ready for the start of the season. So overall, folks, a lot of optimism for the Giants season as they get started. Looks like Brian Daboll has the right idea, has them on the right track, but got to play some meaningful football, got to resolve some of these remaining issues and just see how it all comes together. Because this year, quite honestly, if I had to take a guess, I would say maybe the Giants are going to go 8-9, but this year is more or less about evaluating what they have and where they need to go. So that's what I think the objective is going to be. And if the Giants should happen to eke out a playoff win or win a division, hey, that's just gravy. So we will see how it all plays out, how it all shakes out. It gets started a week from Sunday at Tennessee. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for us here on the LockedOn Giants podcast. I want to thank you for tuning in. And again, reminder, the live show with the entertainer will start at 1:00 tomorrow, or Friday, I should say. It'll start at 1:00 and we'll go for about an hour, hour and a half. Bring your questions, bring yourselves. We'll have a great old time, and then we'll send you into the Labor Day weekend, the last weekend without Giants football. So until then, everybody have a great night, and we'll catch you tomorrow.